Hey there, my name is Billy, and today I want to talk about outlining your book. I always have trouble when it comes to this process of outlining. It can be something that can really stump you, that can really demotivate you and keep you from writing your story. And I've had this issue and problem really for a very long time when it comes to certain stories that I start to write, and then I start thinking about the word count, how long it's going to take, how long it's going to get me to finish it, and then other aspects of the story itself. And I always wondered how other authors would do it when it comes to Stephen King and how he did it because of how big that story is, along with Brandon Sanderson and his books like Mistborn and the other titles under his belt, which is very many. And it's one of those things that I always wondered, some authors are better at plotting, some are better at pantsing or discovering. But I found when it came to me and the type of stories that I write, which is like a mixture of different genres like fantasy or paranormal, I find that when it comes to trying to get my thoughts down or how I want it to go, that I really need to plot out the story for myself personally. And I've done different things when it comes to trying to plot and doing different aspects to see which one best suits me. And it's a lot of trial and error and trying to figure out what works best for me. But one of the ways that I plot a story is I really just, at first, if I have a small description of my book or how the story is in general, I'll put that first. So if I know how the story is going to end, I will put that first. Something that is very important that can basically magnetize me to the idea of my story. Then I will basically just write down all the characters that I have. I'll write down their names and I'll write down their ages. Because by doing this, I get a sense of how I'm going to populate the story. I don't want to have too many characters in my story just because for me it is a lot to keep track of. But other people seem to do fine with it, and I've seen people add a ton of characters in their story, and the way they juggle those different characters is really fantastic. But for me personally, I like starting at 5 or 6 characters, and if I feel like adding some more, I will, but they will mostly be background characters for the most part. And then after that, I like to get into the character profile. I like to know more about not just their name and age, but what they do for a living. I like to know if they have any family, how many siblings they have, if they have parents that are alive or dead. And in this section, when getting into the character profiles, I can really get more of their backstory. If they had a tragic backstory, like if their family was murdered or they never had a family, or if their father was someone who was very quiet, someone who's very forceful and powerful. So your character could be someone who is more timid, more quiet, and doesn't have a lot of aggression. It doesn't feel like they're worthy. And you can also put in their different hobbies that they might have, what nicknames that they might go by, or even other friends that they might have that connect to your story, and you can tie them together. You can also add any important details, like if you want a certain character to have disability and you want to remember it, I usually put it into the character profile. That way I can go back to it whenever I want to and make sure that I am using the correct ability with the correct character. Because in the character profiles, you want to get the details of like how they look. If you want to describe them fully, like their skin color, their eye color, their hair color, how they talk, how their personality is. Are they more upfront or are they more timid? And this one you can really go as deep as you want to, or if you don't want to go as deep, you can just go as bare as you want to. And the final thing that I like to do is I like to come up with my chapter ideas. I like to come up with the notes that I'm going to take into the chapters that I'm creating. So if I am creating a chapter for chapter 1, what I like to do is I like to state what is going to happen in this chapter. I want to know at least what events are going to take place, because I don't want the chapter to just be a slog to get through. I don't want to come back to it and see what was I trying to get out of it. I like to know beforehand, and I want to know how it is going to start, how it's going to end, what is a significant part of the chapter if something important happens. And I want to know what the purpose of the chapter is. Like if it is something that has like major ramifications for the rest of the story, I want to know, because it's one of those things where usually when I'm writing, I have this issue where I'm done with the chapter and I'm ready to go on to the next. But I get away from my story for a few days, I come back, and then I'm wondering, well, what happened in the last chapter? So after I'm done writing a chapter, what I'll do is at the very end, I will write a summary of what happened in the chapter, just so I can come back to it later as notes. So that way I don't feel like I have to read the whole chapter again, because you're going to be having to feel like you have to do that constantly when it comes to certain details. So I would highly suggest, when it comes to trying to remember things, only pick the most important parts that you feel that are necessary to the story going forward, and just let the other ones fall by the wayside. Just because if they're not as important, or they're just very minor details, you don't need to remember them or feel that you need to bring them up in the story, because they're part of your world and they happen in that chapter, but you have to move on to the story. So you want to be able to take away the important details and continue to the second chapter. And I'll go through this different process of, going through the different chapters until I get to the final chapter, or where I feel like the story is going to stop. And I'll just keep doing this chapter notes when it comes to telling what's going to happen, how I'm going to start it, how I'm going to end it, what does the chapter mean, and what of significance happens in the chapter that I need to remember for the chapter after it. And then I'll just continue to do this process over and over again until I am finished with my story. Or if I don't like to go that far ahead, I'll just do this for the first chapter, and then I'll write that chapter out until I'm finished, and then I'll go back and put the summary, and then think, how do I want the next chapter to be? And for me, I feel like this works for me, because I still like to know what's going to happen, but I also like to be surprised by like my imagination, and coming up with something completely different on the fly. So this gives me a way to have a little bit of both. But this is just some of the things that I do to help me outline a story. And I'm wondering, what is it that you use to help you plot your story? And if you don't plot your story, how do you pants your story, or how do you discover your story? Because pantsing is something that I find fascinating, but it's something that I cannot personally do because I tried. Anyways, thanks for listening, and I'll catch y'all later.